to the future and to business agility. There's one thing I can be confident of, that every single person, every one of us in the room tonight, we're on the edge of a new frontier. We're on the threshold of uncertainty and an amazing future. And I wonder how much of us are really well prepared for that journey. The other thing I know about everyone in this room is we all have way more to do on our to-do list than we can possibly do. That does not fare well for our journey to the future. So tonight, I'm going to be sharing some insights, some tips, some real practical ideas that you can take away to really set yourself up and start to prepare for an amazing future, creating the future, and accelerating your business agility skills and accelerating your organization's journey to business agility. Because that's what it takes to thrive in an uncertain future. We're talking about really thriving in that uncertainty that is ahead of us in terms of our future. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Cool. Before we get started, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. A very thin slice of my story, only to set the context for the topics that we're going to be discussing tonight. I've had the good fortune of spending an entire lifetime in extreme uncertainty and very dynamic industries. I started out my career as a psychologist, and for anyone who's been in the field of mental health and psychology, you know there is no territory as complex as the human mind and human behavior, especially group behavior. So from that I moved quickly into criminal justice, criminal intelligence, and forensics. Took a couple of very deep dives into artificial intelligence, sense making, and pattern recognition. All of these have served me very, very well in preparing for my journey for business agility, which I've been spending probably about the last 10 years, way before anybody even understood or heard of what is business agility, right? Almost as soon as we were starting to explore what does agility mean for software engineering. So kind of cut my teeth on this, so to speak, at the Walt Disney Company. We've probably all heard of them. And anyone who's worked in entertainment also knows that there is no industry as complex and adaptive as making a major motion picture. So starting at the Walt Disney Company, I moved quickly into leading Walt Disney Pictures and Television in support of providing business technology solutions to create feature animation and major motion picture production. And a lot of us who are practicing Agile practices right now in IT, many of our practices actually came from Disney. A lot of people don't know that, but way back in the 40s and 50s, Disney was inventing storyboards, story maps, daily stand-ups, daily reconciliation of costs, and a lot of things that have found their way into our Scrum practices today kind of emerged from motion picture production. So that is an extremely demanding and adaptive industry. So I retired from Disney, went to work at Universal Studios, still do some consulting for Paramount Studios, and pretty much my kind of moniker, or what kind of I bring to the table, is the Walt Disney quote here: "It's kind of fun to do the impossible." Doing things that nobody else has done before is where I feel most comfortable, and that's kind of where my sweet spot is, so to speak, in terms of what my brand is and who I am. Setting the context for what we're going to be talking about. I was a CIO at GameWorks, worked a lot in criminal intelligence, designing forensic systems, trying to stay one step ahead of the really, really bad guys. You can see the pattern here, all very complex, adaptive, and uncertain industries, right? Which kind of has created my approach to work as a very agile, adaptive approach. It's kind of part of my DNA. Agility is part of my DNA. So about 10 years ago when I left, or about 8 years ago when I left my position leading the Agile transformation and Agile PMO, global PMOs for the Gap, I started my own consulting company. And I was approached by a company that really caught my attention. Has anybody here ever heard of Suncorp, the Australian financial services company? They are widely regarded as the most agile company in the world. And I was already aware of that company. So when they called me up and said, Pat, have we got an interesting experiment for you? It didn't take me long to find my way to Australia to actually, I welcome that challenge and to really look forward to the challenge they had. This company, widely regarded as the most agile company in the world, was having a lot of trouble trying to get the business partners to engage with IT. They were thriving in the future of creating IT agile capability, but ran into a major collision course with the business. So what they did at that time, and this was about 6 years ago, they actually brought in their toughest customers. And one story I can remember in the back of the room was the chief data officer and all of his data scientists. Now these were the smartest data scientists in at least the Southern Hemisphere. And they wanted no part of the Agile training that I was about to deliver, but they were kind of forced to go there. We also had tables, probably about the size of this group. We had tables of difficult business customers at every table. So I was kind of like, bring it on, let's see what happens here. It was a true experiment. And I shared with them a lot of the topics that we're going to be sharing with you today. But the story was history. These data scientists were sitting in the back of the room, kind of like, first time you mentioned the word Scrum, we're out of here. And so I learned that later, right? But you could feel that energy in the room. By the time we took our first break, this group was extremely energized. In fact, all the tables in the room were totally energized because they were really understanding that they owned their Agile transformation, and it was something that was absolutely vital to their success. And data science was a big deal for this particular industry in all of Australia. So by the time we took our first break, they'd come up with a way to save $10 million out of the gate. And the rest was just kept going on and on. I've had a long-term contract with Suncorp ever since that day. I go back and spend probably half of my year in Australia, not only working with Suncorp, but every major bank in Australia. Spend a lot of time in the Southern Hemisphere, in Brazil as well, and some other South American countries, New Zealand and Singapore, helping some of the largest transformations extend their benefits of adopting agility to the business itself, to leading business transformations. That provides the context that I'm going to share with you tonight, the exact same thing I share with them in terms of what are the traps, what are the important parts, and how do we actually accelerate our business agility. We ready to get started? Cool. Thank you. So business agility, what's that actually really mean? A lot of people fall into the trap of trying to just take what we do in IT and extend it to the business. That never works, so don't fall into that trap. Business agility is actually reinventing the business to thrive in uncertainty by actually being very nimble, letting go of anything that it doesn't need to do so that it can adapt real time to actually sense, respond, adapt, change, and thrive in uncertainty. Now that sounds like a simple sentence on the slide. It's incredibly difficult to do, but it is an imperative for your company or your business, whatever the industry you're in, to actually pay attention to these words and start to really think about creating a future for yourself, for you personally, where you can thrive. And you notice the words here are sense. All of us in the room, I'm sure, are masters at planning. Planfulness is a major, major skill set. But we've got to now balance our planfulness and our exquisite experience with planning. We've got to balance that with sense-making, finding the patterns, paying attention to things that other people aren't seeing. So we'll do a deep dive on how we might do that and what are some really practical things to take away from tonight in terms of setting us up for success. And let's keep this session highly interactive. I'm going to keep the pace pretty comfortable, and you'll understand why. because we learn the most at the edge of our comfort zone. And so I'm going to intentionally kind of toss a lot of information out there and keep the pace really high, so that after Anup says it's time for intermission, so to speak, then when we come back, we can keep it really practical in terms of Q&A. Does that make sense? Cool. So imagine that you're, as we said earlier, everybody believes that we're heading into uncharted territories. There is no map for the future. Don't even waste your time looking for one. What is it you need to build to navigate the future? If you can't find a map, don't even look at one. And there are a lot of people now who are publishing maps. Do this to be business agile. Do this for business agility. What do you think you need instead of a map? A compass. We need to develop our own compass. And that compass needs to be adaptive. That compass is going to change all the time because the terrain itself is extremely uncertain and it's changing constantly. So don't bother to spend time with maps. Focus on building that compass. The compass there is the kind of middle symbol there. And let go of the pull of the past. Let go of anything that's holding you back. As you're heading into this uncharted territory, don't bring your old processes and practices and cookbooks and pinbox with you. Leave the pinbox at home. Change itself is changing. Seriously, change itself is changing, so our compass has to be so calibrated to change that we change continuously. Does that make sense? We're going to really talk a lot about how to thrive in uncertainty, and the best tip I can give you right now is first principles. This is ancient wisdom coming to us from Aristotle, and it will guide us into the future. Everybody in the room heard of Elon Musk? Yes. Elon Musk uses first principle thinking in everything he does. So if you tapped into how does Elon Musk make decisions, he uses first principle thinking in everything. That enables him to have a disruptive competitive edge, because what's that actually mean? What's first principle thinking really mean? It means that we actually let go of preconceived notions and we do our own thinking. It's very much like having our own compass. There's nobody else who does thinking for Elon Musk except Elon Musk. He gets down to the actual core of the truth, the fundamental truths. He cuts through all preconceived notions. He cuts through any kind of analogies that many of us kind of clutter our thinking with, and he goes right to the heart of the issue, kind of down to the 5 whys, if you've used those, but he goes like a lightning rod to that. He doesn't waste any time paying attention to what's everybody else doing. He goes right to the heart and the core of an issue, applying first principles to actually enable him to have insights that nobody else is having, right? So first principles is the heart of our business agility compass, right? Find our own truths. Don't ask other people and don't pay attention to what everybody else is doing, because most of their thinking is cluttered by analogies and not getting right to the heart of the issues, going right to the essence of the real problem that he's trying to solve, right? Remember that you're going into the future, you need that compass. Why waste time with metaphors or analogies in terms of thinking? Get right to the heart, understand where you're going, and calibrate your compass to get there, and cut out all the clutter. That's kind of rule number 1. If you do that, you will be able to build your organizational ability and your personal ability to thrive in uncertainty. Not only are you going to build that capability, you're going to actually welcome it. You're going to kind of say, bring it on. The bigger the challenge, the more Elon likes it. Obviously, from looking at what he's accomplished, there are no boundaries to what he can accomplish with this first principles thinking. So he can sense, adapt, and thrive in any industry, in any market. So imagine you building those same skills to learn and adapt real time from the future as it emerges. Let's think about that for a second. I'm going over a lot of complex concepts here very, very quickly. But imagine if you build the skills to learn from the situation itself as it emerges. You don't bother to prepare for it. You actually have the confidence to say, bring it on. I'm going to learn real time in the moment as it occurs. That is the heart of business agility. Does that make sense? Any questions or any comments on that? that is really learning from the situation as it emerges. Not having done a lot of training, have a lot of checklist thinking and cookbooks, but actually letting go of all that and learning from the experience itself so you can adapt real time to the challenges that you need to pay attention to. Knowing what you need to pay attention to and knowing what you need to let go. You know, having your own OODA loop, so to speak, another tool that really will serve you. So this enables you to deal with the unforeseen challenges and to pay attention to things that nobody else is seeing. We need to be so comfortable with the unknown that we thrive in that uncertainty. We let go of any fear because we know that we're going to learn real time what we need to learn. By applying the techniques that I'll be sharing with you tonight, it will give you that sense of confidence. Ask the questions that no one else is asking. That's what we need to do, right? Not just using the analogies of everything else everybody is saying, but using first principles, get right to the heart, the essence of the issue, and ask the questions you need to ask. Have the courage to find those questions where nobody else is asking them. See the things that nobody else is seeing. That way you disrupt the disruptors. You become the disruptor, right? Because you're that confident at the edge of creating your own future. Is this making sense? Fundamentally reshape ourselves real time, continuously. So what's it going to take to achieve this level of learning capability? We have to discover and release anything and everything that is holding us back. Seriously, we have to blow it up. Remember I said at the beginning of this talk, all of us have way more to do on our to-do list than we could possibly do. We need to have the courage to let anything go that's not creating real, measurable, competitive edge, disruptive capability in ourselves, and not hang on to the pull of the past. The pull of the past is debilitating. Paying attention or holding ourselves accountable or beating ourselves up for variance to forecast is ridiculous. Seriously, right? That's a pull of the past. Old ways of planning, old ways of navigating, right? We have to let go of those to actually focus on building new radical learning loops, shortening our delivery, treating everything like an experiment. We're going to go into deeper dives on all of these. But does this make sense? This is just a laundry list of things that we're going to need to let go of to reinvent ourselves, to fundamentally reinvent ourselves to be the disruptors. We have to let go of anything and everything that's holding us back. And if anybody has any questions or you want to challenge this, chime right in, because we can keep this interactive. We can't think of, yes please, yes please.
Can you move back to the previous?
Sure.
How about the engagement skill talent? Why should you let go of that? Line number 5, I guess.
Okay. That's an excellent observation. That's a really good catch. We need to try to pull for, clearly engaged and skilled talent are going to be an asset, but we have to make sure that people maintain their edge of learning continuously. The danger of this one, it's a very highly double-edged sword, but has anybody ever fallen into the trap of being labeled the expert? Yeah? What happens when you fall into the expert trap? Beware of experts, by the way, guys. So the engagement is the key. But if people fall into the trap that I am the guru of XYZ, that's a hidden trap. Great call out on your part. Does that make sense? So we have to keep people learning continuously new things. We want to hire for learning potential. Because if people get stuck on a particular programming language or a particular whatever, for their job, a particular tool, and they're engaged and they're really motivated around that tool, and it stops them from learning the new tools that are emerging, that actually becomes a trap, right? So that's a subtle trap, but it's a trap. We want absolute engagement, and we want to hire potential, not necessarily a certain skill. Many of you have probably seen the random job descriptions that are out there. It needs to do this, that, the other thing, and then, nobody actually would fill those job descriptions. But they never say how quickly can that person learn? What kills me are the job descriptions that say, must be really good at multitasking and must know all these things, right? Not in the future, guys. That is not going to serve you in the future. So we have to be good at learning. We have to build this learning agility and this curiosity. When we fall into the expert trap, we actually delude ourselves into thinking, I'm the guru on X. I don't need to learn anymore. I can rest on my laurels and I'm the expert in whatever. And that does become, we have to let go of that delusion of I'm the best at this. We have to kind of shed that and let it go. Does that make sense? It's a very subtle one, so good catch. Awesome. So we can't think, oh yes, Apriya.
Would that also apply to leadership?
Absolutely. In fact, it's extremely hazardous on leadership because with the future, this new territory that we're heading into, most of us have to let go of most of our leadership styles. If anybody has fallen into the pattern of thinking that the leader is supposed to know all the answers, that's exactly where that's a huge trap, right? The leader needs to know the questions, but needs to actually stop telling and start asking, and actually has to flip their whole. So great call out. That's exactly what it pertains to, right? If we think we got to where we are in the organizational, chain of command, and it's our responsibility to know all the answers. If any of you in the room are leaders at that level, you should be breathing a sigh of relief now, because you're not supposed to know the answers. In fact, if you tell people what to do, you're depriving them of the opportunity to learn on their own, and you're actually destroying their compass for the future. So you've got to flip that paradigm completely. Great call out, Supriya. Does that make sense to everyone? We'll go into deeper dives on each one of these. But this slide tells us we need to focus more attention on deepening our awareness and stop jumping to solve, jumping to solutions. Especially most of us have gotten into a leadership role. It's the Agile Leadership Network that you're here attending tonight. This is a radical shift in the ways of thinking and the ways of behaving. So it starts with a deepening awareness of being Agile, and then focused attention on how to do Agile, continuously learning, right? We learn as adults by doing. So we have to get out of our head and pull our hearts and our hands together to actually practice, but treat everything like an experiment. As we're practicing that, not getting attached to the expected outcome. Because as an experiment, remember from our science classes, right? We learned that if we start thinking in thought experiments, and we start writing hypotheses, when our hypothesis fails, we generate new knowledge. What's that mean? We're learning. We learn more when we fail than when we succeed. Why do you think Google is so focused on failing, and Amazon, right? They learn from that bold, fearlessness of we don't care what the outcome is, because even if we fail, we will learn more than if we took a safe route and actually succeeded. When your hypothesis, again, think of your science hat, when you were in science class or your kids are in science class, when your hypothesis is actually true, that means you just validated old knowledge. You haven't learned anything new. You just validated it. Check. That was good. If your hypothesis fails, you generate new knowledge. And that's the kind of generative learning that I'm talking about that will serve you extremely well into the future. Make sense? So I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. We learn by doing. So we can't think ourselves into becoming a business agilist. We have to act ourselves. We have to do it. And then by doing it, we will discover new ways of thinking. The hardest part of this, and the one thing if you take away tonight, and a note to self, work on your mindset. If you work on an Agile mindset, you will succeed in the future. If you don't, you won't. It's as simple as that. The mindset towards succeeding in extreme uncertainty is a trap that you have to be extremely careful to avoid. Does that make sense? Because your mind is not your friend in uncertainty. It craves comfort. It craves certainty, right? And so it creates these mental models, and it trips you up all the time. Everyone is aware of cognitive bias and blind spots. We are just infiltrated with cognitive biases and blind spots, which is why, going back to the last slide, awareness, we have to be able to see the things that nobody else is seeing by validating it, not letting our mental models filter out the truth, but actually using the wisdom of the crowd and leveraging each other's feedback and welcoming anyone who challenges our perception of something, because they're seeing something we can't see, and they're giving us a huge gift. Does that make sense? So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, because this is a quick self-assessment, and there is a tool that you can look at online. There's a lot of great material on this for deeper dives. But you can check out the SCARF assessment, SCARF, online, just www.scarf.com, to assess and learn something more about yourself and how effectively you're already hardwired to deal with uncertainty, so that you know where your blind spots are going to be and you know what's going to get in your way. So let's go into this. Have everybody heard about the Agile or the growth mindset? Carol Dweck's major breakthrough research at Stanford has helped us to realize that anytime an organization is tainted, if you will, by a fixed mindset, what's that look like? There's a lot of judgment, a lot of blame, a lot of finger pointing, a lot of excuses. It's not my fault, it's somebody else's fault. If you or your organization falls into that trap, you know you've got some deep work to do to transform that into a growth mindset. A growth mindset, at the heart of a growth mindset, is something amazingly simple. The one thing that we have to do differently, and I hope you take this away from tonight's session. Has everybody heard the expression, "I'll believe it when I see it"?
Yes.
Yeah? We probably heard that from when we were little kids, right? Here's the real truth using first principles. I'll see it when I believe it. Because our cognitive biases are so powerful that we cannot see what we need to see, that what's ahead of us in terms of the compass for the future. Does that make sense? This again applies first principle thinking to the reality that we create. Everyone in this room creates our own reality. We have to actually cut through that, and it starts by believing in your full potential. Everything that exists right now is not reality, it's your filter of reality. The adjacent possible is your future, and that's what you want to focus on, right? I guarantee you we're not spending enough time on this, but we should be, right? That's the one thing that you can do. What if we can actually manifest success in the future by paying attention to the reality of the situation today and not getting blindsided by our own blind spots? Does that make sense? Right? So the number one thing that you have to start to do to accelerate your business agility and accelerate your mindset, an agile mindset, is believe in your full potential. Do not judge yourself. Do not judge anybody on your team. Judgment is a trap that's vicious. Because once we fall into that vicious trap of judging somebody, it's pretty much we're sunk, right? Because we waste a lot of energy in judging somebody. But if we actually let go of that trap, and we really believed in our full potential, start with yourself, then you wouldn't waste any time beating yourself up when you screw something up, right? You step right into that. You take full responsibility. You say, what am I going to learn from this? And actually you move on. You don't invest any of your energy in that. That's a pull of the past. You invest your energy in what are you going to do about it? What are your teams going to do about it? Yes, Prajesh.
So part of learning when you fail or succeed or whatever the scenario may be is to make some judgment calls.
Part of learning is to see what happened with absolute clarity. Try to leave the judgment out of it. And by judgment, I mean right, wrong, good, bad, beautiful, ugly. That's what I mean by judgment, not learning. It is a fine line of value, right? But you say, what is the heart of what just happened? You don't beat yourself up by saying, what an idiot, I shouldn't have done this. I work with a lot of executives all over the world, a lot of president level folks. You can't imagine how much time they waste beating themselves up for coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? Let it go. What did I learn? Let it go. And when I say let it go, I mean let it go with no critical judgment, right? You can obviously, you might need to discern, use judgment, your mental cognitive judgment to figure out what might I have done better. But we're using judgment here as a kind of an emotionally attached right, wrong. There is no right, wrong. In fact, anytime you hear your teams saying, well, that's not the right way to do Agile, that's the wrong way to do Agile, that's the kind of behavior that we need to stop, right? There is no right, wrong. What did we learn? What was the goal? What's the outcome? What did we learn? Does that make sense? So we want to let go of that emotional baggage that gets wrapped around judging. That guy's an idiot. You've heard that expression before. You jump to that conclusion. What an idiot. He's wrong. I'm right. That's all the language that tells you, wake up. I need to be putting my energy into a different place, creating my own future, creating the adjacent possibility. When you think about this, it's a huge relief off your shoulders, right? You're not bad. You're not good, right? You're human, right? You're going to make mistakes. So let go of that judgment piece of it. Does that make sense? It's a fine line balance, right? This is not easy, but it's simple. Yes, please.
How does retrospective,
Yes.
focusing on learning,
Yes.
fit into that model?
Brilliant. Here's what I do if I'm facilitating a retrospective, knowing that every minute counts. I draw a little T-bar on the paper as we're going into the retrospective, and I don't bother to say, what did we do that was really, really good? What did we do that was really, really bad? I say, stop and start. What are we going to do? We're going to stop doing this. We're going to start doing that. We don't waste a lot of time talking about, if we turn that right into actionable learning, then imagine the power. Your people are going to start enjoying coming to retrospectives. If they come well prepared to say, okay guys, what did we learn? What are we going to start doing? What are we going to stop doing? And we turn those into learning stories, right? We don't get into any judgment. In fact, that's why we use the prime directive in front of every single retrospective. And that says, no matter what happened, we really believe that everybody did the best job. That Norcross prime directive is helping us get right to the learning, right? Start, stop. Imagine if you go into a retrospective with that powerful focus on what are we going to do about it, right? It creates this energy that's amazing, as opposed to feeling like a victim or like, even though somebody might be quoting the Norcross prime directive, you got an attitude if you're coming into like, that guy really screwed up, I hate him, like I don't want to sit next to that guy. We blow it up. If we just start, what are the actionable learnings? We're going to start, we're going to stop doing these things. Does that make sense? So you will all get a copy of these slides. So I'm going to go to this one. Manifesting our future. We have to believe in our full potential to create an amazing future. If we don't, if we fall into a victim trap, where, we know what that feels like, right? That's got to go. We've got to believe in our full potential. We will stop judging ourselves. We will stop judging other people, and we will just focus on creating an amazing future reality. We have to redirect that energy into truly believing in our full potential, and you will manifest it. Here's a good quote that you can take away with as well. We are doomed to failure if we don't, on a daily basis, destroy our various preconceptions. You see how that fits in? We've got to let go of those blind spots. The baggage that we have to get rid of, in addition to all those processes, are these old mental models that we're just dragging along with us like tin cans if we're feeling victimized or we haven't let go of something that happened 5 years ago, because it's holding us back. Those are the things that are holding us back. Does that make sense to everyone? Yes, come on.
So in our daily life,
Yes.
we are so used to doing whatever we do every day.
Exactly.
How do we step into this sort of mode, like, based on the Tai Chi 104?
Yeah.
How do we look at those daily things and reinvent ourselves every day?
It's a great question, and we should probably treat that as an activity when we come back from break in a couple of minutes, but I'm going to give you this is an invitation, so it was a perfect setup question for this. Imagine if we actually recognize that we are a complex living system, and our company is a complex living system. We fall into the trap of thinking it's like a machine, and we're supposed to tune it into a fine-oiled machine, more is better, those kind of traps. We have to recognize we're complex, we're adaptive, we grow and learn continuously, but we've got to stop doing the old things that we used to do. We've got to learn what's serving us now and what we need to let go of, and then we need to let go of. We have to understand that we learn best and we thrive best outside of our comfort zone. So we actually have to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone, even if it's as simple as taking your watch off the hand that you normally put your watch on and putting it on the other. Creates discomfort. You've got to create your own discomfort. The old Pink Panther movies with Kato? It was always like, Kato was the disruptor in the Pink Panther's life, and he was constantly attacking him from all angles, right? Create your own Kato. Invite your teams. Disrupt yourself. Drive different ways to work. Don't sit in the same seat. Stop. Recognize the patterns that are destroying you, the patterns of comfort that you fall into. Disrupt yourself, Kamal, is what the answer is. Kind of disrupt yourself, stretch way outside your comfort zone. So when you take on an assignment or you get something to do that you would really rather delegate to somebody else, right? Take it on, right? Get out of your seat. Walk out into the field or your business, your customers. Go see how it feels to be a customer, right? Get out of the office. Stop going to all of those insane meetings. How many of us go to meetings at least every day? What if you didn't, right? What if you asked, show me the value of this meeting, and what if you actually were the disruptor that said, let's cancel the meeting, or better yet, have a 5-minute meeting, have an A3 prepared, this is what Amazon does, an A3 prepared, this is the intent of the meeting, here's all the information you need to know, the outcome of the meeting should be to make a decision, to clarify, an outcome, whatever it is. Stand up in the meetings, and when you're done, you're done. You give everybody back the hour. And start creating a culture of new awareness and new respect for everybody else's time. Because you're disrespecting everybody's meeting when you come into those brain-dead zombie meetings, right? When we leave that meeting, if we're less energized than when we walked into the meeting, stop doing that. Why are you doing that? Are all those meetings really creating the value? Show me the value. We'll get into that after the break. Take responsibility. You have to take the responsibility to create the time and the space to learn and to grow and to disrupt, to create the future. If you're not spending at least 25% of your time creating the future for yourself and your company, because you're in brain-dead meetings, because you're on somebody else's agenda, stop doing that. Challenge, be the disruptor. Say, well, you can't create the future if you're in brain-dead meetings 40% of your time, or 100% of your time, right? So you need to take responsibility to do that, right? To create the energy to focus more on the future than everyday dramas, right? We all get sucked into the everyday dramas because we think we're the expert and we should be doing that, right? That's how I create value. But reinvent your own value proposition to really challenge yourself. What am I really doing that creates value? And what am I doing that just feeds our complacency, feeds our comfort, right? Create an environment where everyone is fearless. If you have any fear at all, that is holding you back, right? I've got 3 minutes and Anup is vigilant there to make me stop in 3 minutes. Know that we cannot fail. We have to be absolutely confident that we cannot fail, because even like Google, even if our initiative doesn't succeed, we learn more by doing it. And we can write it off with an R&D tax credit, by the way, which is an added bonus, right? We cannot fail. So here are the preconditions for business agility. And we'll leave this slide up during the break and come back and do deeper dives. But at the heart of it, I've got 3 minutes more, Anup. I think I can do it. Creating a growth mindset, create an agile mindset, make value visible. Create a culture that challenges value. Show me the value of that meeting. Show me the value of this work. Cut out anything that doesn't create value boldly. Co-create cultural systems thinking using first principles. Look at the whole. Get off of the dynamic of getting sucked into the daily drama. Step away, look at use first principles to figure out what the real problem is and go right to the source. Don't get sucked into solving the problems. Focus on creating the solution. That's what Elon Musk does. He doesn't get sucked into the dynamic of solving all the problems in the world. He creates the future opportunity, and then the problems themselves dissolve. See, everything is an experiment. And I mean everything. That means if you are working on a team where you have a prioritized backlog that's been put in order, don't believe that every single one of those stories creates value. Challenge everything. Is there a simpler way? What would happen if we didn't do this? How do we test it? Really challenge, disrupt that. You know, a lot of people, as they're embracing agility, they still get stuck on let's look at every known possible requirement and focus on doing that. Flip that switch to say what's the least thing we can do in the simplest way to get it out to the customer now, to disrupt anybody else in the market and be the disruptor and beat it. Create space for innovation. We all have innovation labs. That's not what I'm talking about. Create the mental space to work innovation into your daily job. Think and innovate on everything and learn continuously real time. Practice it. Yes, please. We just have 1 minute. I just have to let you know that.
Sure. So when it comes to regulatory organizations, I worked for GE once, wherein we were dealing with machines which goes into human body.
Yes.
Do you really want to leave that, tolerance of,
That's
uncertainty?
perfect. That is an outstanding question. That's a 2 for you today. That's awesome. So I do most of my work with regulatory industries and with regulators in Australia, believe it or not. Here's the secret sauce behind that. Most of the regulatory controls are fear-based. They are not reality-based. Think of a bullseye and start with the test first. When you pass the true regulatory requirement and hit that bullseye head on, don't keep adding more requirements, right? Think about that for a second, and I can tell you some stories during the break of major breakthroughs I've had with like companies that make life-saving machines. When you nail regulatory compliance, you've nailed it. Don't keep trying to nail it and nail it and nail it. Go right for the test first, and we are at 7 o'clock. Anup, I did it.
So, here is the break time, 15 minutes. We want to have the takeaways in there, some retrospective items, take a look at the jobs. Also take a look at the conference notice there. There's some security conference coming up on 20th of this month, which is right here in Crowley Plaza, right across the street, across the bridge, I would say. It's still a 7-minute walk maybe. So take a look at that. Get out of our comfort zones as we got to know about that much more than what we knew earlier. So introduce yourselves to 5 new people. How about that for a challenge? All in 15 minutes. Right? All right.
Uncertainties. When introducing agility, any form of agile into PMO, I appreciate any input, especially thank you. Yes.
Did you want me to address
Yes.
that?
Would you?
Oh, absolutely.
Please.
And please, everybody else, this is everybody's forum.
Yeah.
So actually, I led the PMI's adoption of Agile, and kind of one of the areas I do specialize is the PMO. So everything we talked about tonight applies. The most important thing from a PMO is to make value visible. The second, in making value visible right in the center here, right? And to expose all of the waste in process that no longer serves us. So there isn't a cookbook or a formula, but when you embrace and take a hard look at what is a PMO, in fact, what I'd like to help PMOs do is to reinvent themselves as a value delivery office. Imagine if the PMO actually starts to challenge, how do we create value in this new world of Agile? And what if we actually reinvented ourselves as a value delivery office and rebranded? We actually call them a value delivery office. And then they come up with amazing new ideas of saying, all these things that we used to do, all this old work, variance to forecast, excessive planning, thank you. All of that will, I've got a 2-minute warning, that's why I thanked her. All of that will actually, we need to shed and say, how do we actually, what is the metric we should be looking at? Certainly not variance to forecast. We should be looking at, are we getting better and better at reducing the cost of value for our company? And they become the value champions. They become the value engineers, and they rebrand their personal value proposition in terms of, we create value for the company. We are the guardians of value, and we shed any old process that no longer serves us, right? And I think my time is probably up. No? 1 minute?
Yes.
Oh, cool, 1 minute. Does that make sense?
There's a problem with, there's this question that whenever PMO is introduced into any larger organization, there's already a barrier.
Yeah. They need to cut down that barrier.
How?
Rebrand themselves, right? So when you know there's a barrier, right? Remember the value proposition and what we were talking about the whole first hour today. When you know that barrier is there, step right into it and say, we know how you think about us, right? But what if you actually co-create your value proposition? Step into those barriers, guys, really. And I think I might be out now. So sorry. I can take your question at the next break if you like, or afterwards, because I'm done now.
We'll
Right?
have a Q&A session anyway, so.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. We'll get there. Thank you.
All right, so we'll come right back into our main topic, and I'm super excited to see these virtual stickies and what is going to be our exercise and engagement around it.
Cool.
So let's go ahead and start that.
Cool.
There we go.
That was a short break, but that was good. Now, in the spirit of pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
In the spirit of pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone, I'm going to move through the rest of these slides extremely quickly, but invite you to stop me if anything provokes an idea from you. Also, use the stickies that Anup is inviting us to say, what are our takeaways? Because now is where it gets really fun, right? We're going to go into these with some of the major ideas. And also, if you have an idea of how would we apply this to a PMO, start really thinking about that and writing down your questions, because I'm going to go as fast as I possibly can to leave as much time for questions. Is that fair? You up for that? A wild ride ahead, right? Okay, making value visible, that's what the PMO does if they retransform themselves to a value delivery office. And that enables every human being that you work with to really have a clear line of sight of how everyone can create value. That's the new charter for Agile leaders, and that's the new charter for a PMO, right? Stop trying to do more work faster and start generating more value by doing less work, far less work. Be ruthless at killing any work that doesn't have significant measurable value. Not marginal value work. You've got to shred that too. Eliminate anything that doesn't, you can't show me the value on our value model that we're creating, stop doing that work. Does that make sense? You have to be bold and ruthless, and imagine if a PMO focuses their energy on that. PMOs also have to move into sense making as well as planfulness. Do only what matters and nothing more. This is an invitation to yourself. If you're doing anything that you cannot see creates real measurable value, stop doing it. Ask yourself first, what's the risk if I don't do this? And you might have to negotiate or trim it, but really kind of take responsibility to do this, guys. Your boss is not going to come to you tomorrow and say, stop doing this work. You're going to have to build a business case. Yes, please.
What I noticed when you do that, you're going to be a more pleasant person to deal with, and you're less overwhelmed. And actually, by doing less and eliminating more tasks, you are able to focus much more on the bigger picture thing.
Brilliant, and that's exactly how you create the future, right? You need to create the time and space to do it. Nobody's going to do it for you. Also, you feel less like a victim, right? You feel like you're in control of your future. Brilliant insight. Does everybody see that? Right? It takes effort for us to get into that mindset, but when we do, the rewards are significant. That's how we create the future, right? Remember, there is a cost to value. Most of us, especially PMOs, have fallen into the trap of more is better. You've got to actually transform that into less is best. And many of us get into the output trap. Look at me, I'm so busy, I had to do these 47 things today on my to-do list, right? Recognize that the perceived cost here is what's important and the perceived value. You've got to actually reduce the effort to create the value. If you can create equal value by doing a fraction of the effort or the output, you win. Does that make sense? Look at it from a mathematical model, right? The person who does the less effort, the less output to create the greatest outcome wins. Give yourself a challenge, make a game of it. How can I create the same amount of value in a fraction of the cost? And constantly work as an Olympian would to beat your personal best, right? Co-create a new culture. Co-create is a very important word for you as you embrace the future and create a new organization. Recognizing that your whole organization is a living, breathing organism. When we're dealing with creating a new culture that's focused on value, we have to look at it as a whole system using first principles. Remember Elon Musk's way of thinking. What is the new leadership I need? What do my people need? And how can I create value for my people as leadership? And how do I challenge the org structures and the processes that no longer serve us? And you slice through this pyramid, and you'll notice from the pyramid, if you try and introduce change only with process, like Scrum, what's going to happen? You're going to fail. The organizational antibodies that create the wholeness of the system is going to treat it just like a human system would treat an invasion of a virus. The antibodies will swarm, and you'll create all kinds of negative energy, right? So use this as a model of taking a whole systems approach and first principles thinking to look at what do we need to change in our org structures. The talk that we had here just 2 weeks ago was about, holacracy and introducing new org structures, right? There are major solutions out there already along each of these dimensions. You just need to recognize you need to take a holistic approach to driving business agility adoption. Whole system. Start with the culture. Create a culture that's going to actually thrive in reinventing and co-creating itself. Be an agile leader. Role model the mindset that we talked about. Inspire and release our people and hold them accountable for being their best. The number one power tool that we have as an agile leader, no judgment. We have that agile mindset. That's a given, right? But we need to let the teams know with absolute clarity what success looks like and hold them accountable for achieving it. No excuses. No blame, but no excuses, right? They will move heaven and earth to achieve that when you gift them with the clarity of what the successful outcome is and holding them accountable. It sounds counterintuitive, but accountability is your power tool as an agile leader. Make sense? Empower everyone with safety, autonomy, mastery, and inspiring sense of purpose. These are the things that our people need. Understand that and give it to them. Do whatever you need to create a sense of safety. And one of the most powerful things you can do is say, my bad. The buck stops with me. I know you're going to do a better job of coming up with an idea than I do, so I want to hear what you think, not tell you what to do. Does that make sense? Learn to think like an entrepreneur. We were talking about this during the break. A lot of this is entrepreneurial thinking for corporations, right? See everything as an experiment. Don't take anything at face value. First principles thinking is don't take anything at face value. Just because it's the number one priority in my backlog doesn't mean that is the number one priority in my backlog. If I don't understand the value, and if I don't look at the thinnest possible slice that I can do to deliver that so I can validate that is the number one thing to do by getting it out in front of the customer in a week or less, then that's the way we work in an agile environment. Does that make sense? Everything's an experiment. Even the estimates are hypotheses. Find better ways to do it. Faster, with qualified risk, right? Obviously, in the example where it's life-threatening, you're going to be much more mindful of real risk and not fear-based risk, which traps many of us when we say, oh, it's a regulatory requirement, more is better, right? It's a regulatory requirement, less is still best. And I can share with you some stories if we have time. Yes, please.
So, in your example of you have a prioritized backlog, what in case it's been funneled in and I've only got to know 2 to 3 time items in my backlog, the full picture. In that case, we may not have that visibility to see whether we are working on the best value.
Yes,
it could be a
that's okay.
At the upper scale.
Exactly. We focus on what we know. We start with where we are. So we pull that first item off the backlog. And if we're using Scrum, we'll actually, in our sprint planning meeting, we ask the hard questions. Show me the value. What's the level of effort? How do we validate that? Is there a thin slice way of testing this? Right? It's like we don't have to go look at the 20 other things that are in the backlog. We focus on the things that our product owner has prioritized for us. But that doesn't mean that we over-engineer the solution. We work together in our sprint design session to think what's the thinnest possible slice of this we can run and validate this with the customer so that we can actually reduce the cost of value. When I'm going to go back a couple slides to show how that is this, right? We have a perceived value. We're going to reduce the perceived cost by doing the thinnest possible slice to validate that value and learn continuously. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it requires a new level of thinking, but you might notice that everything I've been talking about tonight, creating an amazing future, requires us to think in new ways, right? And we're going to start to get really good at that when we start to practice it, right? So learn to think like an entrepreneur, have the agile mindset. That means you welcome challenges, you demonstrate the courage to fail fast in order to succeed sooner. So failure has to be welcome in your world. You can't blame, you have to give up the blame game. Learn continuously through fact-based empirical learning loops. How are we knowing we're getting better? We have to ask the right people, are we getting better? Focus on doing only what matters in terms of creating value without compromising quality, because quality is an imperative for future value. We cannot slip on quality, right? We can slip on value in terms of slice it thinner, but we can't shortcut quality. Look at the whole system, eliminate all waste, create time and space for innovation, and start to become comfortable being uncomfortable. This is going to require us to stretch way outside of our comfort zone. Cool. That's what we want to be, right? Way outside our comfort zone. We want to actually kind of practice design thinking. Yes, please.
And just real quick, what I noticed, the quality is normally getting better when you have less other things and processes to worry about.
Bingo. It will, won't it, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not adding all the noise. We're cutting, we're slicing right through that. Naturally, quality will get better.
Yeah.
By nature, it'll be organic, right? And we're going to actually reduce a lot of our technical debt too, because most of that technical debt came in when we were trying to do more with less. We're blowing up that whole concept, right? Do less, but do it better, right? With better quality. Great insight. Thank you. Stanford offers a great B-School design thinking class. You can take it online. You can learn more about it. But we want to practice design thinking. And everything we've been talking about now, basically up to this point, has been design thinking. So this is just kind of note to self. Take a couple of those free online courses from Stanford. Carve time out of your day. Stop going to those stupid brain dead zombie meetings so that you can reinvest the time in taking some design thinking and introduce it into your organization. That requires us to embrace ambiguity and open our minds to all possibilities. By doing design thinking, you will naturally start to think in first principles like Elon Musk does, and like Aristotle did before him. Aristotle introduced the concept a long time ago. Ancient wisdom still holds true today. And strategically leverage all constraints. My teams know that I use this word a lot. Instead of thinking of a constraint as, oh, wow, and falling into a victim trap, turn that constraint into leverage it. Say, okay, we have a fixed date. What can we use to de-scope to hit that fixed date and really create a competitive edge by becoming first to market? Don't whine and say, Agile doesn't have fixed scope. Fixed scope is a powerful tool for Agilists. Use every constraint that you run into, short of the triple constraint, which is not doable. That's impossible. But use a constraint, whether it's budget, whether it's resources, to de-scope, get right to the heart of what's really important, run a thin slice test, learn quickly. So leverage constraints. Use them to your advantage. That's part of design thinking. So how are we doing on this? Seeing everything as an experiment. We're almost through. Creating space for innovation and learning continuously. Empower and create a culture that's focused on innovation. How are you going to do that? If you're working at 100% capacity, you're not going to do that. You've got to create the space and time and energy. We were sharing some ideas over break. Stop the brain dead meetings, stop stupid things like status reports, make everybody accountable and visible. You don't have to waste 10 hours a week doing status reports. Throw away any variance to forecast, kind of use rolling way of planning, adopt beyond budgeting practices and principles, create an agile enterprise, really challenge the agility of everything and start stretching outside of your comfort zone by making sure that your planning is as agile as your delivery. Right? Optimal, adaptive, self-organizing workforce. We talked a little bit about that. The speaker last time talked a lot about creating an environment where teams can self-adapt, pull work off an enterprise backlog and really kind of build the skills they need to thrive in tomorrow's world of uncertainty. Network connections are really an important key here. Build strong networks. Kudos to all of you for being here tonight. You're here building your networks real time. This is how you do it. Build the same strong networks at work. Put your energy into building that trusted, confident network so that you'll know that we all win together, right? So build a strong network to demonstrate that. Right, and let go of your particular domain-specific territoriality for the greater good of the organization. Build capacity through continuous learning. If we're learning all the time, and we use the retrospectives to do those learning stories and get better and better, we're building our capacity, aren't we? We're building the organizational IQ, and we're building each person's capacity. Use that capacity to create the future, to pay down all the debt, the process debt, the managerial debt, the PMO debt, to actually get better and better and better, and transform uncertainty into network knowledge. What's that mean? That means when one of us learns something, we need to find a way to cascade that into network knowledge so that everyone in the organization can benefit from that knowledge. Come up with a taxonomy, a knowledge network where people can pull that knowledge or find ways to actually share it. There's no easy ways to do any of these, but really make sure that when you learn something, you find a way to cascade that, not only to everybody in your team, but everybody in the organization. That's what network knowledge is, and that's how you create a truly learning organization. Learning is the heart of business agility, right? Create a business innovation incubator, get out of your office, go look, see, take Gemba walks. Gemba walks is a lean agile principle that says, get the heck out of your office. Go see what's happening, experience the teams, drop in, go to where your customers are, figure things out, see things with a fresh perspective, but get out of your seat. Get outside of your comfort zone, into the real world. Understand that business model innovation is a creative act, and reinvent yourself continuously. Who does that really, really well? Amazon. They do it better than anybody else. They're reinventing their business models all the time. If you haven't reinvented yourself lately, note to self, try it. Yes, please.
You
mention engaged customers in many of your slides, but I haven't seen engaged stakeholders yet.
Yeah, customers and stakeholders, it extends the idea of a customer, so that's a great call out, right? We don't necessarily differentiate who's a real customer. You have a lot of customers. When we're talking about agile leadership, your customers are your team. When your team is your customer when you're a leader, right? Your stakeholder is your customer when you're in a business environment, right? So we don't differentiate. Empathy for customers is really powerful. I'm glad you brought that up because a work-related incident just last week helped me to help a team that we were working with had a self-assessment that they would be bottom of the food chain. They were using that language. They were using those words. We kind of said, wait a second, here's an invitation. You're closer to the customer than, let's imagine they're a call center, right? You're actually at the top of the food chain because he who is closest to the customer, figuratively speaking, the department that's closest to the customer is the highest part of the food chain, right? So reinvent yourself. Don't brand yourself as we're just the call center, right? The call center is the most important organization in your environment. I've done a lot of innovative work with companies in Australia to help them discover that. And guess what happens? Amazing results. When you put the energy in the call center, and I'm just choosing that, the release team operations is definitely closer to the customer than the development team. So don't think you're at the end of the food chain. Reinvent yourself to the top of the food chain. Make sure that happens. Does that make sense? So the same holds for stakeholders, right? We don't just put them in a separate class. They are our primary customers, right? If they're funding the, right? Yeah, excellent. Great call out. Cool. So design for the future. Don't design for short-term thinking. Design for 5 years out, right? That's how you invent the future. Design for the future. And send that message throughout the business. Be inspiration accelerators and gather ideas from everyone. Imagine how your team's going to feel when you give them the next innovative challenge. You don't come and tell them what the new innovation is going to be. You pull from that team their innovative ideas. Amazing things will happen, right? Because they then start getting energized at whole new levels. Keep breaking paradigms, and I won't go over all these because we've covered most of them, but you'll have this as a checklist to take away. Anup will make these slides available. He already has the slides. He'll just make sure you get them.
Absolutely.
Also, you have access to this video recording, so use it. Use it, right? Excellent. So hopefully they all make sense. How do we help everyone to learn faster than the pace of change? How do we build learning agility? The number one technique I use in all of my business agile engagements is always try to understand why and show me the value. If you get right to the heart of why we're doing something, you can slice right through all the noise and figure out what's important and what's not, even in regulatory industries. Important, especially in regulatory industries, because they are bloated by fear-based wastes and fear-based controls. Guaranteed. Just look at that. The ability to learn, adapt, and apply ourselves in constantly changing environments requires us to tune some of our core multiple agility elements. And in a nutshell, the mental agility is the most important one. That makes sense to everyone, right? We talked most about that today. Our own mindset, change our beliefs, change our behaviors. People agility, it's all about our people. Our people are our primary customers. If our people aren't happy and they're not productive and they're not fully engaged, our customers will not be. So focus our energy on our people and build our people agility, especially for the PMOs. They need to be people. Change agility. Change is everyone's business. We've got to all shed everything that holds us back, but the secret sauce to change is co-creation. You're not going to change anybody, no matter how hard you try. It's a total waste. But if you inspire them to be part of the change and to change themselves, magic happens. So if you're involved in any kind of a transformation, change is co-created. You inspire them and create an environment where they can change themselves and get out of their way, or give them the rewards that are commensurate with that change, right? But change requires us to simplify everything and let go of all the waste. Systems agility, look at the big picture, focus on the culture. Are we really investing in changing our culture? Or are we hung up on the processes, right? Look at minimum viable process and minimum viable everything. Kanban is a good tool for this. If you haven't started playing with Kanban, if you're stuck in Scrum, give Kanban a little shot. See what you might want to use, at least in terms of your change initiative or your innovative improvement board. Use lean systems thinking and design thinking, as we talked about. And then value agility is where you're really going to make the difference with that PMO. If that PMO reinvents itself and builds a new business model for itself as to be the value guardians and the value champions, and they are actually really the value evangelists, then you will succeed at transforming the PMO into a very successful catalyst for organizational growth and business agility, right? So in a nutshell, the framework that I've developed starts with believing at the center, starts with that new mindset and building your awareness, really building a keen sense of awareness. Ask yourself, what haven't I noticed lately? What am I missing? Ask everybody else, what am I missing? Get that feedback, and the more critical the feedback, as long as it's delivered in a respectful way, is a great gift for you, so welcome it. But ask. Don't expect somebody to come and tell you. Ask all the time, and value that critical feedback. Don't just ask for, yeah, you're great, no, say, really, what do I need to improve, what will that be? Focus on discovery and experimenting, knowing that everything is an experiment. Don't get stuck on a solution. Most of the time we fall victim to jumping to conclusions and jumping to solutions. Anybody ever do that? Happens all the time. Don't do that. Stop by doing a discovery session, by looking at least 3 possible options, by not going to the first idea we come up with, by asking everybody to weigh in. What do you think we should do? What do you think we should do? Don't get invested in your own default reaction, because it's probably missing something. If you get a team to give you ideas, you're going to get much better. So enter it with a sense of strong curiosity and discovery. Don't presume. You remember what we talked about first. Don't presume you're the expert and you know best. That's the syndrome that we talked about. That's the expert syndrome. You will not thrive if you fall into that syndrome. Take action as quickly as possible. Get out of your head and take it into the lab and say, try it. We're not comfortable. We don't know for sure this is going to work, but we know that we're going to learn more by experimenting than if we spend all of our time in our heads or trying to do the analysis. Learning is the key. We went over that. Learning is the heart and the soul of agility. And then transforming means taking that learning and transform it into creating the future. Does that make sense? This is an iterative loop. The faster we do it, the better we're going to get. Right? Every day, if we kind of go through this iterative loop, we're going to excel at being the disruptors and disrupting our biggest competitors in the market. Our future is created by what we do today, really today, not tomorrow, not waiting for tomorrow. So what commitments, what bold, tough choices, and what commitments can we take away from tonight's session that we as leaders are going to commit to do differently? Is this a good time to, there are a couple more slides that give you some ideas, but we'll leave those for you to take away. Is this a good idea to kind of turn it into Q&A? Sharing ideas? Anybody have any? Anybody come up with a bold commitment you're going to make as a leader when you walk away from the session tonight? What are you going to do differently tomorrow? Yes, come on.
Invest 25% of the time designing the future.
Awesome.
At least.
Awesome. Kamal's committing to reprioritizing his schedule to guarantee that he's going to spend at least 1 day or more a week in focusing on the future. So that means you're going to have to stop doing a lot of the things that are distracting you now, right? Yeah, really, it really does, right? Because otherwise it's wishful thinking. I saw other hands go up. Are there people going to go do the same thing?
Yes.
Cool, awesome, awesome. What other things? Yes, please.
I would like to prioritize my task and find out what is the least effort task that will be the most value.
Brilliant.
That's tomorrow.
Brilliant, right. That's a brilliant approach. Right, starting tomorrow, you're going to look at the smallest level of effort to achieve the desired goal, which means you're going to have to put on your value thinking cap. And another thing I might invite you to consider doing, take everything on your to-do list and put it on your don't-do list, and only do the ones that are going to give you the highest value, right? Don't bother to hack away at what you're going to take off your to-do list. Put them all on the don't-do list. And say, if it's really important, it'll bubble up to the top, right? What's the worst thing that can happen if I don't do this? And if I have to do it, do exactly what you said, minimum viable effort to give the minimum result to get the greatest value. That's a brilliant example of doing less. And give up the delusion of doing more with less. That's going to kill you, right? You're going to just drive all that stuff and create serious quality challenges. Yes, come on.
I have a question with that regard. How can we safely, start to make visible, just like the work that we are doing and
Right.
the right outcomes?
Yes.
But also what we choose not to.
Brilliant question. What does the group think about that? Big visible charts. What if we had a waste reduction campaign and we made it a campaign? And let's give the biggest loser or the biggest person who could find innovative ways to stop doing stuff, awards. Treat it and start with your sphere of influence, with your team. Say, let's come up with innovative ideas to stop doing something. It forces you into first principles thinking, because you have to ask, well, why were we doing it in the first place? And what's the real outcome we want? And how can we achieve that outcome with your idea of the least level of effort? By even having that campaign, you're going to provoke first principles thinking and get everybody set up for a new value-focused mindset. Second thing, transform your PMO into a value delivery office and make everybody accountable for value. But celebrate the waste reduction. Wouldn't that be a cool idea? And say, these are the things that we stopped doing, and these are the times we've saved, when we're reinvesting that into creating the future. And here's the results that we've got as a result of that. Make it big, make it visible, make it bold. Create it as a real campaign, like you would a weight reduction campaign. Do a waste reduction campaign. Get fit. Make it a get fit campaign, right? Create little Fitbits, right? We all use the little Fitbits. I know Oren has running legs. Use it as a value Fitbit, right? What have we lost? What are the waste? How many steps have we taken today to eliminate things? And have fun with it. Yes, Sabrina.
So what goes hand in hand with that is challenging everything.
Yes.
Challenging
Challenge everything.
And even if that is something we came up with.
Exactly. Especially if it's something we came up with, right? Because it's our pet project. Challenge everything. Show me the value in a very respectful way, even with your boss. Help me understand the value of doing this status report, and why do you really need it? You need to make decisions, then show them a better way to get that data real time through your Jira boards or your story mapping tools or whatever you have, right? If you start to do that and literally blow everything up, you'll be amazed at how quickly you can let go of the past, right? Best way is to design the future, though. Don't hack away at every little thing, but say, get everybody engaged in the campaign to reinvent ourselves. This is how we work today. Yes, please.
Outcome-focused meetings.
Brilliant. All meetings have to have a specified outcome. The outcome of this is this. And if you use the A3 that we talked a little bit about, that's what Amazon does. No meeting happens unless you've defined a very clear and measurable outcome and have sent out the pre-work. Here are the facts. Here's what the proposal is. Here's what we need to achieve. And give them all the data you need. You can give that meeting time back by telling them what your approach is, and then have them very well prepared. not only for the outcome-focused meetings, but what if you treat each meeting like a stand-up? You clearly identify the outcome, and then you say, as quickly as we can get to this outcome, everybody can have the rest of the hour back. Then you start scheduling half-hour meetings. As quickly as we can get to the outcome, you can have your 20 minutes back. And you actually create an environment where you have fewer meetings, right? Or you blow up the meetings so they don't have any real measurable value. Just stop them. Just say, what's the worst thing that can happen? It forces you to think at a more critical level. Why are we having this stupid meeting anyway? Well, you know, most of the time it's because we've always had it. Yeah, that's going to get us to the future, right? We'll always be having it after we go defunct because we won't exist anymore, because we're having all those old meetings that didn't create any real value. Just because we were comfortable thinking we were creating value by going to the meetings. Some of us might even think, I'm really important. I spend all my time in meetings. Therefore, I must be the most important person in the organization, right? Not. That's delusional thinking. Great ideas. Other ideas. Other takeaways. What bold things are you committing to do differently? If you are a leader, what if you commit to never telling your teams what to do, but start asking more questions? And keep a daily scorecard tracking how many times did I accidentally tell somebody what to do. You might even be bold enough to tell your team to catch you if you tell them something to do, and give them a permission card. Call me on this because I'm trying to actually behave as a more agile leader. And I'm going to stop telling and start asking. Right? So call me on any slips because I know I'm going to screw up. How about the culture? Who wants to tackle the blame game? Blame is not welcome here. Anytime somebody comes to you with an excuse or blames somebody else, you turn it right around and say, well, what did you do to help? I don't want to hear. This is not acceptable here. You can't come to me with an excuse that you didn't get your work done because somebody else screwed up. What did you go do to help? And what are you going to do differently next time? That's going to stop the blame really fast. But it starts with you. You have to make sure you stop. There is no blame. There is no single throat choke, so to speak. You're not looking for who did it. You're taking the blame on yourself. What if you as a leader said, the buck stops with me, there is no blame, my bad, let it go, right? That is the fastest track to creating safety in your organization. If you stop any finger pointing, any excuses, no judgment, you're the leader, stops with me, so we don't blame here. Maybe help kind of boost your team's working agreements by having the team share with them some of the insights you've learned today, and have the team reinvent their working agreement, rewrite it, to say, we deliver, no excuses, no blame, right? We all win together. If one person fails, we all fail, so it's silly to blame somebody else, right? When you see somebody needing help, you go help them, right? You don't use that as an excuse to blame them for not getting something done. Other ideas? Yes, please.
I should give more compliments. I think that's a good motivator to people find things that they do right instead of naturally being focused on things that don't go
Genuine compliments, genuine recognition.
with a reason.
With a reason, right? Help them understand why, and celebrate more too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, even failures. Compliment people for having the courage to step out of their comfort zone, even if they fail. Say, well done. You stretched. Yeah, exactly. But you have to really mean it, right? Very good. Excellent.
Share what they learned.
Exactly. And celebrate what they learned, because that's creating new knowledge. That's the best way you create an environment of that. Invite teams to really get creative too. Google's got a pretty cool system in place where the team is rewarded for killing projects early. When they find ways to deliver the lowest, the highest value stuff and shed and kill stories, they get rewarded. When they kill things in their backlog that are like those trailers that give you low value, like that nickel and dime stuff that's at the end, they get celebrated, right? We killed our project, well done. Killing Low-value work becomes the celebration in the new world, right? Because you've got to kill the stuff that's holding you back, as opposed to hoarding it because your team got the budget for it. What if you reinvest that budget in doing something that's even more important? Other ideas? How are we doing for time, Anup?
Good. So it's time for Q&A.
Cool, Q&A time. What still puzzles you? Please.
Talking about value, right? But how do you really measure value?
Brilliant. That sets up the PMO too for a new and powerful role. The PMO has a lot of really high value skills in terms of planning and analysis. What if the PMO, defining themselves as a value delivery office, started asking really important questions and building value models to help every single person make rapid decisions because they knew exactly what the trade-off sliders were for the highest value in the company. So there's a whole technique that you can Google, or we can try and kind of come back and do a talk later on value innovation. I also teach a course at Berkeley on value innovation. The key is making value visible and making it quantifiable. So what does that exactly mean? If you look at the value of each story, so think about this, guys, in terms of Scrum, in terms of your stories. Imagine if during your sprint planning, everybody knows what sprint planning is, right? Where you're actually looking, everybody's done sizing on story points, right? What if you as a team start to size the value points using the same planning poker? You ask your product owner to help you understand what is the value on the strategic drivers that are most important for delivering that product or that asset to the customer. And you as a team use your critical thinking, the same reason why you size story points as a team. You size value points as a team. And you really have a strong, hearty question and answer period with your product owner to understand the product owner's reasoning for what is the real value, how are we going to measure the value of this story, what are the benefits that we expect to realize from this story to help us assign value points. What if every story you started to have, you start getting better and better at this when you start doing it, every story has a value point and a cost point or story point. Guess what? If you divide, do the math, the value points by the cost points, and you get a relative value index. You're now thinking at whole new levels. And what if your PMO stands up the capability to do this with an enterprise value model that says for the next quarter, these are the top 6 things that's going to move this company forward. Assign points to it, measure it, and trace each story back to the value it delivers on each of those points. Do you follow me on this? Mm-hmm. This is an amazingly powerful way to kill low-value stories because you've got the math there. Or you find ways to reduce the story points, the cost measure, to amplify the value points. It goes back to the algorithm I had in the earlier slide. Does that make sense to everyone? Yes, please.
How is that different from ranking which product owner would have done? We assume it's good to challenge, but product owner has a role to give us the prioritized backlog.
Yes,
and the
absolutely.
ranking which he would have given, I'm presuming all these would have been factored in and the team doesn't have to do this exercise again.
Yeah, I'm going to toss a question out to the whole group and ask you to think about this. If you might have noticed, there's a pattern of topics we've been talking about tonight. What really disrupts us are the unknown unknowns. That's why we really suck at estimating, right?
Yes.
And that's why we get the wisdom of the team in terms of estimating effort. Because if you ask any one of us, we're going to have a bias. But when we get the whole wisdom of the team to do it, now I'm going to does everybody agree to that? That the wisdom of the crowd, it levels all of our distorting estimates. So given that reality, we all know that to be true. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So why in the world do we think that any human being known as a product owner is going to have greater wisdom than the wisdom of the group in terms of being absolutely perfect at prioritizing the backlog? Now, we know it's their job, right? But we don't want to ever set up any human being. If I was a product owner, I wouldn't want to have that, crystal ball, because the product owner doesn't know what the team knows in terms of the complexity. That's why we do sprint design sessions, right? So imagine during the sprint design, we were the catalyst to have a really rich conversation about value points. It's not going to create any wasted effort, because it's going to be the team's going to be asking the right questions, so they know what trade-off decisions they have to make to do a thin slice effort based on what the real value of that is. And it helps the product owner be top of their game in terms of explaining. One of the things we didn't talk about tonight is we learn more, us as human beings, we learn more by teaching than any other technique. We actually use different parts of our brain when we teach. So think of this as a teaching moment for our product owner, to teach the team their value prioritization technique and to understand why this story is going to create more value than this story, right? So we're not reinventing the wheel, and we're not challenging the wisdom of the product owner. We're amplifying that by inviting the product owner to teach us what their logic was and to give us a chance to really help the product owner understand the discovery options. If that's the value, then maybe we could reuse this other thing that Joe's working on over here, right? Can you see how that could really create a really healthy environment where we're all creating a culture of show me the value? And none of us is ever afraid to say, show me the value. What better way to do it? Remember I said today, we learn by doing, than to practice starting putting value points on stories. They're not expected to be right, any more than our sizing is. Our cost, our effort points, story points are not intended to be accurate to precision. But then you have a really, if you're the developer who's working on this story, you have a greater depth of knowledge having gone through this and got the team's way in. One person on the team might have a deeper knowledge of a particular tech stack or technical debt trap, and they can see that through this deeper understanding of the story, right? And we're going to start getting so good at it, just like we do with planning poker. The estimates are going to just come very naturally, right? If we're all right around the same level of effort, we just quickly, it just takes a minute. Imagine we're doing the same way with value points. It'll just take a minute, but it'll expose those hidden things that sometimes we don't figure out till halfway through the sprint, and we have one of those oh shit moments, right? We're going to have those up front. We're going to know whether we need to slice that story into two. We're going to have that conversation a little bit earlier to avoid some of the traps and to avoid some of the technical debt. Does that make sense? Cool, it's a great question. Third one for you, that's awesome.
I should
Yes,
read now.
please.
Kind of extending that thought in a different way. I have seen my team struggle with some of these decisions, and
Yes.
I'm kind of thinking about a scenario where potentially there are a bunch of stories wrapped as a feature, and it's kind of perceived as it's all or none. Even though you
Yes.
have choices, that some of that is perhaps higher value.
Yes.
Maybe we can't really, how do you?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So the whole concept of thin slicing comes into there with minimum marketable feature thinking as well, right? So we start to have to tease those apart, right? Because I guarantee you they're not all of equal value. Guarantee it. Try it, right? You'll find wild variations. So it's just almost, we started tonight's talk by saying the uncertainty of creating an amazing future is going to require us to think in bold new ways. One of those is to challenge everything. And if you have a whole bunch of parts bundled into features or whatever you want to call them into a set of stories. You want to tease them apart and have a really good conversation. That's how you start to kill the waste. That's how you start to reduce the technical debt balloon, right? Because the reality is, there's been extensive research done on this. You can look it up or let me know if you need me to help you point to it. Most of what we do does not deliver the expected value. If we're not putting the expected value out there, then how the heck are we ever going to know that it's not delivering the value? Then how the heck are we ever going to know what to kill? Then how the heck are we going to learn? Do you see the pattern here? If we start putting the perceived value out there, and we put those value points on the stories, and we tie them back to an enterprise value model that the PMO, who's now the Value Delivery Office, is managing for us, and then we actually start to do a thin slice where we're looking at the benefits that we're getting, guess what happens? We're learning faster than the competition. But if we don't have that disciplined way of thinking, we are lost in space. We have no clue. If we just say, oh yeah, we can't untangle the hairball of this particular story because they're all equally important, what's that sound like? Very bad thinking, right? They're not doing critical thinking. Because you want to tease it apart and say, what's the worst thing that can happen if we don't do this one thing? What if we start to build our thin slicing skills in the team so that we're all asking those incisive questions? How can we slice it? How can we have the thinnest possible slice to expose our hypothesis, right? Because remember, it's not known until we validate it with our assumptions. But if we haven't defined our assumption, then we'll never know, right? So does that make sense? Yes, please. You had a point? Did you have your hand up? No, sorry. Somebody else had their hand up. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I really like the way you explained how to leverage the regulatory compliance constraint for our advantage. Would you like to give us one more example of the same category?
Oh, sure. The regulatory? Like
any other constraints that you might...
Yeah. Thank you. Right. The regulatory ones, by the way, are really powerful. And I've done work with the Federal Reserve Bank as well as the regulators in Australia, and they completely subscribe to it. They're like, yes, not fear-based, heavy regulatory stuff that they have to slog their way through, but start with the test first. Start with the essence of the test. Another one I'll do is something I do quite regularly, and that is most large-scale enterprises truly struggle with capitalization and following the guidelines, the government regulations that prescribe how we need to report labor costs to developing a particular asset. Literally every company in the world is struggling with this one, so I'll pick that one out as one. I was just up at T-Mobile 2 weeks ago helping them solve this conundrum. I'll be working with a USAA Insurance in a couple weeks to help them work through it. Does it make sense what I just said? So it requires the solution to that one, and you can find a talk I did on this topic at the DevOps Summit in London about a year ago today with a detailed playbook and test. Start with the test first is the secret sauce behind every single one of these. So start with the test first, and define the solution that you know is going to be regulatory compliant, that's auditable and defensible, and don't do any more, right? Do less. Start with the test of compliance first, and test that test, and then stop doing any more efforts to achieve that compliance, because when you hit compliance, you've hit compliance. You don't have to be more compliant. Actually, by trying to be more compliant, you actually screw up, because you give the auditors more to look at, and then you're going to find a false finding or a failure. Does that make sense what I just said?
Yes.
Yes.
I actually think all the principles that you have shared with us is actually going straight back to the Agile Manifesto.
Exactly. And first principles, right?
Yes.
First principles.
Yes.
Exactly right. Right? Do less. It's right there as a principle in the manifesto, right? One of the principles. Don't try to do more with less. Do less. Simplify everything. Make it simpler, right? Even after you thought you simplified it, make it simpler. Do you see how the value points actually are behaviors that reinforce those principles. Every single thing, great insight, every single thing I talked about tonight are actionable items that you can do that adhere to the first principles of the Agile Manifesto. You won't find anything that doesn't. It's just that somehow people seem to get lost along the way, and fall into the old cognitive traps of more is better, and not shed the old things that are holding us back. That's why the manifesto signers invented Agile, right? And it's still true today after all these years. If you go back and reread the Agile Manifesto, if you haven't signed the Agile Manifesto, check it out. You can go out there and actually sign it. Freshen up your ideas and sign it. Recommit yourself to really living those principles and applying them with some of the techniques we're covering here tonight. Yes, please.
I think a big portion has to do with that conventional wisdom, no one wants you to do more.
Exactly right.
And even, I hate it at work when people ask me for one thing, and then you do it, and then they say, here's the next.
Yeah.
I'm like, that doesn't incentivize me, then tell me right away that you have 4 things.
Exactly.
You don't come up with one thing, and
exactly right. That's the do more with less, delusion that's killing us. And you brought up a really good point. Conventional wisdom is killing us.
Yeah.
That's where first principles thinking, Elon Musk doesn't let conventional wisdom get in his way. He slices right through it with first principles. Screw conventional wisdom, right? Go right for the truth. And find your own truth. Don't listen to somebody else's version of the truth. That's the spirit of the talk tonight. Cool. Other questions, insights, puzzles, challenges, anything at all? Or are we full? We had enough? Good to go. I think we're good to go, right? Thank you.
Amazing. Let's do a quick exercise now that we learned so many things. How about a word or a sentence from each one of you, or some of you who are inspired enough to say, what did we learn today?
A lot.
What did we learn today?
Develop a growth mindset.
Great, thank you.
Ask why.
Ask why, perfect.
Disrupt the comfort zone.
Okay, yeah,
Believe in your full potential. Yours and your team's.
golden.
Get comfortable in being uncomfortable.
Nice.
Do less.
Do less. I love that the most.
Make value visible.
Cool, great.
First principle.
First principle.
Conventional wisdom.
Screw conventional. Love that.
Learning without judgment.
Perfect.
Leverage the constraints.
Nice.
Don't compromise quality.
Don't compromise quality. Perfect.
Gemba walks.
Gemba walks, that's one of the most important things. Get out of your office.
Stop judging.
Stop judging. Absolutely. No good and bad.
Think in a way that you are experiencing, experimenting everything.
Perfect.
All
Experiments.
estimates are hypothesis.
Good one. They're precise to a point of 50% to 200%. Right? Okay, what else? Great
Find the
takeaways.
value.
Find value?
2 value points along with the story points.
I love that fact though, and I love to see say video rather than PMO. It's an amazing one. That could become a topic, and probably you're talking about it already.
Teach the product owner and learn from the product owner.
Super.
Continue learning
Nice.
every day.
Exactly.
Teaching is the best way to learn.
Yes.
Yay.
Make sure meetings are outcome-based. Like
Love that.
with the
Love that.
Get rid of your preconceptions.
Perfect. Cool.
Be fearless.
Be fearless.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's one of the best ones.
The last thing for me is like leverage constraints. For me, that's a strong point. because most
Leverage
people-
constraint. Don't get bogged down by that.
Yeah.
Right?
Give a permission card to your teammates and ask them to call out when you text them or tell them what to do.
That's part of being fearless, right?
Co-creating versus trying to change.
Co-creation.
Yeah, co-creation.
Absolutely. That's one of the keywords.
Invest in the future.
Invest in the future, yes.
What happens in the future depends on what you do today.
Great, great. There's nothing about tomorrow, today, right?
I'll see it when I believe it.
Super. You have one more?
Pat is a good speaker.
Thank you so much. The takeaways, the verbal takeaways right away. And let me say this, I've seen her talk all the time, and it's great to see that participation and attention from all of you. And, calling these out, we just made her day, I'm
Yes,
sure.
oh, you did
Because
make
that
my
means
day.
it went through right from our brain to our heart.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If